Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Shop and Spool Modeling and Detailing with BIMrx Fabrication. Just a few housekeeping before we start. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, not the chat panel. Also, a recorded version of this webinar will be available on the website and YouTube channel within a couple of days. You'll receive an email when the link is ready. Before we jump into the webinar, I just want to introduce Microdesk to you all. Okay, so Microdesk was founded in 1994 as an Autodesk reseller with a simple mission to assist architecture, engineering, and construction firms with improving workflows and integrating project delivery technologies. 25 years later, and that mission still holds true. Microdesk is a well-established AECO consulting firm with 13 offices in the US and UK. We have over 230 AECO consultants, solution specialists, and software developers that can help with all sectors, all disciplines, and all stages. Some of the hottest topics in the AEC world are globalization, urbanization, and sustainability. Urbanization studies suggest that the U.S. will build 114 cities the size of Boston in the next 30 years. Here at Microdesk, we can help to ensure you are prepared to meet these demands. We use software from industry leaders and combined it with our vision and passion for sustainability to meet the demands of urbanization. Our team of industry expert consultants are redefining project delivery and asset management. Some of the hottest topics in the AEC world are, we are committed to helping clients realize the business benefits of BIM quickly and economically by facilitating the use of innovative technologies and processes. Whether it's streamlining your design, construction, or operations, our consulting team is the nation's largest and most experienced group of AECO technology consulting professionals. To help support the industry with these demands of urbanization, we provide full-service consulting. This includes building information modeling services, enterprise strategy and workflow assessments, technology management, mentoring and support, application development, and much more. We partner with world leaders such as Autodesk and IBM to utilize innovative technologies and methodologies to empower sustainable design and overcome local challenges. Our mission is to reduce environmental impact of urbanization by helping the AECO industry to design, construct, operate better projects more efficiently by leveraging the full potential of BIM, BDC, and asset management. Now, Akira will jump on to take you through today's webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Akira Togawa. I am a strategic business consultant here at Microdesk. I have about a dozen years of experience in the industry. I started out as a mechanical engineer and focused on industrial and process projects. And later in my career, started working with the fabrication shops and the construction sites. And lastly, have become an Autodesk expert for Revit, AutoCAD, Fabrication, and the BIM 360 products. The agenda for today is focused around Microdesk's BIMrx Fabrication tools. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the current fabrication landscape first and maybe see where some of these trending ideas are going in the industry and how BIMrx Fabrication can fit in. We're going to do a quick demo of some of the tools in the fabrication toolset, specifically around spooling and detailing of sheets. And then we're going to open it up at the end for some questions from the group. While I'm doing the demonstration in the application, I can take some questions and maybe go off of script and look at some other features or means and methods of using the tools. but otherwise we'll address any of the other questions at the end of the webinar. All right, so the current fabrication landscape, I love these pictures. They always remind me where we came from many years ago before software. Tirelessly working with pen and paper, stencils and scales, whole teams of people laying Mylar over themselves for coordination. And while a lot of these skills are no longer required, I think they lay the groundwork for some of the best practices that we still use today, which is technical accuracy and collaboration. It's still critical to this day. So I always like to remember, what was the point of this in the beginning? It was to get ideas on paper very accurately. Fast forward, today we're using very sophisticated software to create 3D versions of models, which are also now containing data, cost, and let's say hours to install. And from here, what we can do is we can then send these digital representations to the real world to cut patterns and to actually build directly from our designs and our fabrication software. And in the recent years, we've also started looking at coordination. So it's one thing for us to be able to build our sheet metal from a software, but to coordinate all of that when the design teams or the other contractors are not in the same location or not even in the same part of the world. These are the things that we're seeing, and we're doing a great job of coordinating these projects so that out in the field, we're minimizing RFIs, change orders, or just wasted time in general. So where are we going from here? Where are the trends? I think the big one is this new, I'll say, digital design lifecycle, where the owner at the end of the day wants to see all of the information that the design teams, the program managers, and the construction firms have added as an investment into the digital information of the project. They want to be able to put a bow on all of that information and have it during the ribbon cutting, so that if we need to look historically at what happened, it's almost the memoir of this project. And this is really the common thread through projects these days, is that we need a means and a method of taking the information as it's injected into each phase of the project and making sure that it's accurate, it conforms to what the owner wants, but then in many ways also making sure that when the baton is passed from the design team to the pre-construction team, that information stays true throughout and that it's readily accessible. And as these designs become more sophisticated and more accurate, we start to really look at, are they truly digital twins of what's happening out in reality? And I think a lot of folks want that. That's kind of where we want to get, is almost an augmented reality where I could hold up my BIM model through some VR goggles or on a tablet and look in the real world and see that it actually was built the way that we planned it. That while we might not look for 100% perfection, we are striving for as realistic of a digital model as possible. Another trending thing that I see is as we get a lot more information from the design teams, the program managers, the pre-construction team, the facilities folks on a job site, you're going to have a lot of paper. Here this image shows that at the job box, we have schedules, we have drawings, and while the digital version can accompany that in many ways, and for the past couple of years, it's been a complementary thing to have the digital asset. I think what ends up happening is now we no longer have a single source of truth. So, what is the latest version of the drawing? Is it the one on the iPad? Is it the one that I printed? And which one do I build off of? And this is a very real problem that we're seeing during design and most importantly during construction, which is I'm out in the field and I need to know, am I going to hit something if I run this steel, or what exactly is supposed to go where? And it's up to the project teams to come up with that single source of truth to say, here's the latest and greatest version of that information that you need, and anything else is uncontrolled, right? And we need to craft that solution. So when we think about all of those things together, the back of the house folks that sign the checks go, well, that's great. We've spent all of this money investing in all of this digital technology, and the goal is for us to ultimately save money on these projects, right? We want to reduce RFIs. We want to obviously increase safety. Coordination should have been done at a desk rather than in a field, and that should all equate to profit. But how do we really make that happen? Because, you know, in the picture to the left, where you have some folks not knowing where the single source of truth is, we're now introducing new problems of many different pieces of information, and you could be building off of an uncontrolled copy, and ultimately it's the wrong thing. So these are kind of where the industry's going and some of the new problems that we're seeing. And while fabrication is just one piece of it, I think we need to look at the ways that we can take responsibility or accountability for our piece in the grand scheme of the project. And so the tools that we're going to look at today are specifically focused at fabrication, and I'm going to be doing mostly sheet metal work here. I think from a sheet metal perspective, you know, there's a very real connection between the digital model and the burn table where we're sending these in. You know, they take up a lot of real estate up in the ceiling, so coordination is key. But it's also very time intensive for us to create these fabrication models. They're massive models, and there's a lot of information in them, and we need to create documentation from there as well. So the tools that we're going to look at today are the spooling tool, the hanger tool, fabrication properties, renumbering, and tagging. Spooling is a way of us taking some lessons learned from some out-of-the-box features of Revit in creating assemblies and just adding some nice quality of life features to them to align better with realistic workflows. The hanger tool is just really a lifesaver when it comes to large projects. We can quickly lay out dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of hangers in a single click or a couple clicks based on some requirements. And what I like about it is that it also leverages the existing fabrication database. So it's a very controlled and expected set of hangers. Your modelers can't go off spec to put a hanger in. Fabrication Properties is a new one to the list, and what this does is it kind of cracks the hood on the fabrication database within Revit to allow you to see some of the properties of each of the components that you're modeling from the database that currently aren't exposed in the traditional sense. And we can even kick those out to Excel for some data manipulation down the road. Renumbering and tagging are really when it comes to the detailing side. We want to make sure that our bill of materials has logical numbering for our parts. And we want a means of consistently tagging our parts with numerous tags and making sure that the drawings look organized. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to Revit, and we're going to go over these in kind of a story or a natural progression of how this would go in the field, or I'm sorry, in the site. So what I have here is a somewhat nominal sheet metal and some piping model here in Revit. And these are all fabrication components that are modeled. And I have some equipment. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to show how BIMrx kind of looks from a ribbon perspective and the user interface. Microdesk has a suite of many other tools under the BIMrx umbrella that we're not going to be showcasing today, but we are going to be looking at fabrication. One of the nice things about each of these tools is that there's a little feature here which will either have it be standalone, which is what I've done for fabrication to make its explicit own tab, because as many of you power users on this call might know, there are a lot of tabs on Revit of add-ins, and it's nice to be able to either collapse it back into the master tab or to break it out explicitly if you need that. So what I've done is I've broken this out explicitly, and I'm even going to drag it down here so that I have it more readily available. Another tool is BIMrx Core. This is a means of linking Revit, both importing and exporting to Revit, or I'm sorry, to Excel. And I might leverage that again today, so I'm just going to keep those down here in the event that I need them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a section box, and I'm just going to work on a particular area of this work. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with some hanger layouts. So I'm going to crop this down to the area that I need. And this is where we're going to be working today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with laying out some hangers on this particular run that is going horizontally. So I'm going to click on the hanger tool. And the first thing that we get here is the distribution settings. So these are distances between hangers, distance from the start. We have an option to attach to structure. And what this does is it takes the fabrication hanger and shoots the rods or the upper attachment to a structural member, specifically slabs, vertically north or up from that hanger. And if it can't find any, then what it does is it basically goes all the way up to the level above, to that level elevation. And then attaching location points. This is for Revit native hangers versus fabrication hangers. And both of these are used for exporting to do site markings out in the field for embeds or deck inserts. As we know, fabrication hangers have them natively in, so this option is added if we are going to go with Revit families. We're going to be only using fabrication today. So I'm happy with my 6-foot spacing, and I'm happy with my 12-inch from start, and I'm going to click OK. And then what it's going to ask us to do is select the components that we need to hang. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hang a couple for now, just to show you how it works. And then after that, we're going to look at a larger scale application of this. So I'm going to click on these two parts, and I'm going to click Process. The tool then recognizes that this is the service name from the fabrication database, and based on that service, these are the hangers that are available based on the fabrication database. I'm going to go ahead and click on trapeze hangers, and I'm going to click OK. You'll see that it placed them 1 foot from the beginning or the end of this joint, and then 6 feet apart. And that was pretty quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show this on a larger scale to show how quickly this tool can lay out hundreds of hangers at the same time. I'm just going to bring my crop box back. Great. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it again, same settings, and this time I'm just going to select all 3 levels. And you'll notice that I'm box selecting. The tool is going to know what has hangers, what doesn't have hangers, and I'm going to click Process. Again, we're going to go with trapeze, and I'm going to click OK. It noticed that there was another service that I had selected. These green lines here, these are, let's just say, mechanical pipes. And again, it said, okay, you have a service here for copper, and here are the hangers that are in. So we're going to go with Clevis on those, and I'm going to click OK. So this iterates through, and within a matter of a couple seconds, we have all of our hangers laid out. Now, granted, we're always going to need to coordinate, right? But we're getting, it's maybe the 80-20 rule here, where we got the majority of these hangers completed. This one here is just off because of my crop box. But it did multiple services. It did it at the right size, right location, right spacing. I can always go in and I can, edit this as I need to. But, to get this done, there's no better first start. Okay, so the next set of tools that I want to look at are going to be the spooling tools. And now that I have my hangers laid out, I'm ready to start identifying the spools that I want to create. And we're only going to create a few for this webinar, but keep in mind that us here internally, we use these tools heavily, large scale applications, thousands of spools in a Revit model. So the dialog box here is organized in such a way that this gray area in the middle is where all of our spools are going to end up. The darker gray area is where we go to create the naming scheme and to create new ones and perform actions on them. And then we have a view tab, and this is where we set up settings for later in the process for what types of views we want and what title block we want when creating these assembly drawings. So I'm going to put my initials in here as the prefix, and we're going to start with 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say we're going to take this run right here. This is going to be our first spool, and I'm going to click new, and you'll see that it generated it here. It generated the level number. The status is assembled, meaning it's not fabricated or installed or shipped. Service name, and even the level that it came from. Those of you who have used CADmep know that one of the features in there is the color coding option, which we've kind of brought over as a legacy feature. So this particular spool is blue. And what I do is when I generate the next spool, we'll see that this one will then turn red. So I can kind of see my spool map straight from this 3D view. What I'll do is I'll generate, let's say 3 more. So I'm gonna go with this one here, and then we'll generate one on a higher level just to show that the level information gets updated. Okay, and we'll see level 2. A nice thing about this is, as I mentioned before, 4 spools is nice, and I can see them all on here, but when we have 1,000 spools, this list can get a little cumbersome. So we've introduced the option to filter by 2 different criteria from this table. So let's say that I want to look at level first. So I can see here that I have 3 on level 1 and 1 on level 2, and I can drop that down and see them nice and organized here. This really helps me keep everything organized. I can even start sorting later by maybe the service type as well. So I have, only one service type loaded into this project, but I would see my supply air, my return air, my 2-inch water gauge, whatever the system abbreviations are grouped there. The other nice thing is the filter. So I can search for any characters on here, or I could just search for one. It doesn't really matter. There's wildcards on both sides so that it's going to be inclusive of whatever you're searching for. So as a combination of grouping and the filter command, you could really dial in to find the spool from your model that you need. What we're going to do next is, now that we have these spools defined, is we want to create some sheets and views for them. I'm going to head over to the View tab, and I'm going to pick my 11 by 17. I'm going to want a plan view. And for this particular one, I'm just going to go with a 3D view and a ductwork schedule. I'm going to click on that first spool, or let's do 2. And I'm going to click on Create Views. You'll see here at the bottom, confirmation, 2 spools created and 0 failed. I'm going to head over to my project browser, and you'll see that these are now under assemblies. And the 2 that I just created, and you can see here that they're now spooled. I can now go in and I can look at those sheets. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup work, where I'm going to take this, maybe add the view template to it that I liked. Set my plan view over here, set my 3D view over here, change the scale to 1/2 inch, and I'm pretty much ready to go with detailing. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to tag. Oops. I'm going to tag these with the mark number. And I'm just going to detail this out. Okay, great. All right, so within a couple clicks, I was able to create a bunch of spools, create the sheets, create the views, get a bill of material on here, and I'm pretty close to done. What I'd like to look at next from the fabrication set as we go through this process is the Renumber Tool. So the Renumber Tool is just a way of taking fabrication parts, their item numbers, and assigning logical orders of item numbers to them, or grouping numbers together. I can give you a good use case right here, which would be, maybe I'm not happy with, and this is completely preferential, but maybe the order that these numbers go. Maybe I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4 in a different direction. So I'm going to fire up the Renumber Tool. And I'm going to check on this button, use ordered element selection. And what this does is it allows me to pick the order that I want my numbers to go in. So I'm going to start with 1, 2, 3, 4, and hit escape. And you'll see that these numbers have all restacked. Nice clean way of doing this, which would be, you know, if I had to do this the traditional way, I'd have to select that component. I'd have to go in here. It's kind of grayed out because I'm in the assembly. So it's just a very easy way of us renumbering these objects. Another way that we renumber is if I go to my spool map and I start to click on some of these objects, we'll see that this is item 1. This is item number 198. Here's another 198. If I go in here, this is a 1, so they're inconsistent. And maybe I want these all to be the same item number. One thing to note is that when we're using the spooling tool does automatically renumber all of these parts, as you saw here before, 1, 2, and 3, at the time of spool creation. So you won't have to necessarily do this on a large scale for your spool maps if you're creating assemblies, because it does it automatically, but sometimes we just need to make sure that these are all the same number for other reasons. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can say group all of these that have the same length and give them the same number. We're going to start with 1, and I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click on all of these duct runs that we had before, and I'm also including the hangers. That's okay because they're not similar. And I'm going to click Finish. And now when I go in and I inspect these objects, you'll see item number 1, item number 1, item number 1. So now they're all consistent. These are now item number 2 because they were the other group of objects that I had selected. Great. So once all my renumbering is done, the next thing that I want to do on any project is probably start tagging or annotating my spool maps or my drawings. And so that's where the tagging tool comes in. So our tagging tool, the way that it works is we have specific categories that we're offering to tag, and I'm going to start tagging my ductwork. And what I want to do is I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to want, in a traditional sense, sometimes we have the length or the size on the center of the duct, and then we'll have maybe it's elevation, bottom of elevation at the bottom, and some other information at the top. So the traditional way that we do that is we either create a single tag that contains all that information, but it doesn't really allow us to move the individual pieces or fields around because it's a single tag, or we end up tagging each of them individually and then managing the locations of them as they go. So it might be like this, where I go, oh yeah, this is the item number. And I didn't want it like that, so I'm going to get rid of the leader line. I'm going to move it here. I actually don't want that. I want the length. Great. Then I'm going to put another one up here, and I want that to be something else. So it's a very time-intensive task. So what we can do is we can create a pre-laid out format for the ductwork. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, the first thing that I want is the length, and we're going to put that in the center. And with this actively open, I can try it out. So with something set, I simply just select and we see it's there. Okay, pretty cool. So now maybe I want to put the bottom of duct elevation at the bottom. So I'm going to select bottom elevation, and then its location is going to be on the bottom. And I'm going to move on to this one and take a look. Okay, pretty cool. But maybe I want my bottom of duct to be justified to the left. So I'm going to go bottom left, and I'm going to go and I'm going to check on this. Okay, we're looking good, but now maybe I want bottom of duct. So it's good where it is, but now I want it offset from that duct a little bit. So I'm going to add an offset to that. Okay, great. The last thing I want to do is maybe put the size, and we're going to put that on the top left, and we're also going to offset that by 4. And I'll try it on one more piece here. Okay, perfect. So this is exactly how I want it. And what I want to do is I want to be able to recreate this even if I close down Revit and open it back up, or even if somebody else starts detailing, I want them to have this same setup. So what I can do is I can save this. I'm going to save this on my desktop as an XML file of configurations. And what that allows me to do is either email that or send that to someone or keep it in the project folder, and we can basically just load that up whenever we need it, and it'll allow me to continuously tag the ducts. I can do the same thing for pipes. So let's go over here, and I'm gonna approach the same methodology. So let's remove all of this. We're gonna go to fabrication pipework. We're gonna add, let's go with bottom of elevation is gonna go bottom. And we'll say size, center, it's fine, and we'll go with that same offset. Let's try that out. It's a long run. Okay, looks good. So what I'm gonna do again is I'm gonna save this, and this time we'll call this pipe tagging. So now what that allows me to do is I can quickly jump back and forth between the two. So I can go to duct tagging, load up that configuration, tag this, go over here. Now I probably wouldn't be doing this in a realistic scenario, but it's nice to be able to have all of these options to just switch between setups. What this does is, the biggest thing for me is what's the default tag that Revit has set for that category. And sometimes it's 50% I need that one versus 50% I need the other one, and you never get it right. So by being able to explicitly say, I want this particular tag at this particular location, and even adding multiple other tags to that arrangement and saving it for later, it's a great workflow. All right, great. So the last tool that I really want to look at today is one that I mentioned earlier. It's new to the suite, and it's the Fabrication Properties. And the way that the Fabrication Properties works, if we select a fabrication part in Revit, here's what we currently see about that object, right? We see some basic stuff. It's level, elevation, service, identity data, and phasing, which is common to probably any part in Revit. But we know that there's more. We know there's more to this than just that. There's geometry and maybe materials, product codes. None of that is available to us. There's some offerings out there that will get you that information, but what they require you to do is create more parameters or more properties in your model, and you're syncing that information from the database to those properties. It's not live in the traditional sense. And what we wanted is a solution that was live, and even more than that is like, what can I do with that data? So we created the fabrication properties, and it doesn't describe it here, but it's a pane that we show. Here it is, and it's dockable. So I'm gonna slide it over here, and we're gonna look at these side by side. So with the hanger selected, we omitted some of the information from the fabrication properties, which are already shown in your traditional properties. I don't want you to have the same information shown in two different places. We're really just looking at the specific information about that hanger, or it could be this elbow. There's a lot more here, so these are dynamic. Anything that we need to know about that object from a fabrication perspective is here. I'm going to go back to the hanger for a second because, the rod length, for example, that's a big one, or even the duct size that it's being hung off of. So you don't get that information here. What size is that hanger? I don't know if I look at my traditional properties, but I can certainly tell from here. And another great thing about this tool is I can click on, let's say, multiple hangers. Okay, and you can start to see that the lengths start to say various because I'm able to select multiple, and obviously we don't want to see that information here, but I do want to see it, maybe know something about it. So I can click the export button, and let's go with, I'm just going to call it hanger out. So it exported them, and I can open this up. And the current syntax works that individual components are stacked as columns, but I like to see my information this way, so I'm just going to do a quick transpose. Great. So now I have the element ID of the object. I have its sizes in feet. I know the rod lengths in feet, and some other information which you could cross-reference back to the images in your FabMep database. I think this is very useful for us in getting quantifications of objects within Revit that are fabrication parts that we usually can't get. I can even go and let's say take this part, and I can show how dynamic it is. So let's, okay, great. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna scroll down, and we see here the overall size 18 by 8, right? So if I change that to, let's say, well, that won't work, but let's see what happens. Let's draw a new one. Okay, we'll go with 12. Oh. So we can see here that this information is live. When I go and I look at my size, 0 by 0. Unfortunately, that was a bad size to put in, but the fact is I don't have to refresh or reload anything. It's live, giving you the information of the object as you select that object. What it's doing is it's querying the database configuration that's loaded into the project and the object that you have selected to give all of this information to you. What I could do is I could even take this whole run, right? And I could export this, and we'll call this 2-inch water gauge. Look how quickly it can query that information for me. And what I can do is I'm going to open this up. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time, which is just transpose that information. And now what I can do is I can maybe find length, right? And then I can go down here and I can quickly tell you that I have 370 linear feet of this particular duct run, right? So estimating purposes or whatever it is that you need. Now, I know schedules can do it, but I'd rather not have to spool up a schedule just for the selection that I have. It's great to be able to do this. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is turn it over for questions. So I'm happy to go over any of the features again, or look at other ways that they can be used, or just answer some general questions about how we're leveraging the fabrication database or Revit to construct projects. If we don't have any questions, I'd just like to say thank you for joining the webinar. And Mackenzie, do you have any closing statements?
No, just thanks for taking the time for this presentation. It was very interesting. Thanks for joining, everyone.